This situation first should be redefined. They are making it complicated, and it is so simple. It is extremely simple. You have just bad guys and good guys, and bad guys are killing good guys, and unfortunately it is supported by main political powers in the world.
I think that Sarajevo is a good example for the issue of unthinkable futures. The crucial difference between fiction and real life. Fiction must be plausible, real life has no such constraint.
Speaking as a Westerner and as a foreigner, I share the feelings of regret, I would say almost shame, at how little has been done by the international community to sustain the city in its hour of need. Even as we speak, the city is still under the most severe siege that Europe has seen since Leningrad 50 years ago. I would hazard one of the most severe sieges in the history of Europe. There are 12, perhaps 15,000 people dead in the soccer stadiums and the graveyards of this city. Another 50 to 60,000 people wounded, many of them so severely wounded that they will never walk or function normally again. And I believe that we in the West had the power to stop this.
Good afternoon, this is Radio Z Sarajevo, it's 6:36 p.m. What we're doing right now is a message to the world, the white, the black, the yellow and red world. So this is a message to the world, what the world should know, if the world were interested to know about us and what we really are.
It's almost impossible to film a feature when it's not war, because it's difficult. And can you imagine shooting it in situation like this? I mean, it's absolute hell, you know. These filmmakers which are making these movies are just mixed like people in New York. I mean, I'm almost ashamed to say that we are multinational, multicultural, multi-ethnic people, because it's so obvious and it's so normal, and they wanted to make that impression that it's some kind of their ethnic war, and it's nothing like that. It's extreme right-wing nationalism, which is devastating. Also, you know, you tell me how can I be objective, but that cameraman was just doing professionally his job. He didn't take any side, you know, he was just showing it.
Sarajevo has to be destroyed, full stop, because Sarajevo represents something which counters the entire ideology of the war. The ideology of the war is that people cannot live together. But when you accept that it's an ethnic war, you were told that people cannot live together. You were told that something called Serb, Croat, and Muslim is a very true and concrete reality of difference with some kind of justification, in fact, for genocide, when in fact there are very specific political purposes and reasons behind the war, and it has nothing to do with some kind of innate, inborn, inbred hatred.
I feel the extreme moral obligation to be there. And it's not a Sarajevo problem, it's not Bosnia problem, it's a problem of the whole world.
As Ademir Kenovich said to me when he showed it to me, he said, "This is something you're never going to forget as long as you live," and it's true. It's just straight on footage of people lying on the ground who have just been killed by a Serb shell that has landed in the middle of the street and caught these passers-by. It's not the pornography of death. There's nothing voyeuristic about it. It just makes you confront, as nothing I've ever seen, what the reality of murder is. This is not war. This is murder. This is a genocide. It's been a genocide going on all throughout Bosnia, and the targets are civilians.
Well, I'll give you a typical day. Just before sunrise, we usually start getting the artillery barrages. The Serbs begin firing down from the hills at random into the city, firing at the areas that are closest to the lines with snipers, machine guns, and so forth. And then from the hillsides, they fire randomly into the downtown area of the city, and periodically will fire up into the upper reaches of the hills. Sometimes they'll concentrate their fire on one or two buildings. Often they'll try and bracket the UN buildings or the areas where people would be going to the UN for assistance or for help. They'll often fire at areas they know the UN may be distributing food or relief supplies in.
Why was I interested in bombs in particular? Because I think that most people, or almost all people in this city, have become beggars of some sort. Bums. As soon as the sun comes up from the early morning, when the sun comes up over our beautiful mountains, almost everyone has to go out, find some water, beg for a couple of kilograms of flour to make bread, to find some wood so they can light a fire and make that bread. It's like the entire city has been transformed into a concentration camp that is dying slowly from one day to another.
Now I feel we are on some kind of different level. I'm not comparing it in a qualitative term of the world, but we're just different now. You know, all shock after shock, shock after shock, deaths, hungers, telephones doesn't work, there is no water at all, there is no food at all, there is no medical supplies anymore. there is practically nothing.
We are the market, one of the markets of Sarajevo that become a black market during the war. All you need you can find here, not in the shops because they do not exist. All things that you can see are very expensive. For example, one can of a Coke is from $5 up to $10. Vegetable, fruits, and all things are very expensive. Most of the citizens are smokers, and one package of cigarettes are about 5 and sometimes even more expensive. So you can imagine how hard it is to live and to shop in this city.
Drugog zapjewa, ovu ću pjesmu da očutim. Nema mi pjesme bez Sarajeva.
It's more than 10,000 people dead in Sarajevo. It's more than 3,500 kids dead in Sarajevo. And people just don't understand the numbers, 3,500. You have to start with one kid going to school, getting into his class, meeting his 35 mates, and then they 35, they go to school ground and they play with other kids. And they are all slaughtered, and that's just one school out of 10 schools that make number of 3,500.
Bio sam srao ruke. Pala je granata, pala je mene, sinu I mamu. Mama je vama na hirurgiji.
The great big world, with incredible cynicism, is not only watching, but actively participating in producing the Bosnian tragedy. For this shameful behavior, they have a few stereotypical excuses. The first is that this is a civil war. The second is that this is danger to the civilized and Christian Europe from Islamic fundamentalism. And then that this is an inexplicable tribal ethnic conflict that can't be solved but by having a people totally exterminated.
U Bosni 5 ja sam živjela, on je radio Bosni 5 u ovom kafiću 2 dim, pošto sam ja tu izlazila I on u radiju upoznao se prvo, onda malo pomalo profuramo, kaže. I eto onda oko 10. maja meni je bio rođendan, 18 napunila I 12. maja mi se vidimo, onda vjerim se baš s ovim prstom. Vjerim se I kontali smo 15. maja da se uzmemo. Međutim, ja 14. maja odem u Buća potok sa svojima, preko Mojmula kad se išla. Kako sam ja gore bila, nisam ga vidjela skoro mjesec I pol, pogotovo čula I onda kad je došao, masovno se izgubiš kad ga vidiš. Nije da su bili protiv, oni su volili Alena I sve, pogotovo moj otac I mama. Ali meni mama stalno pa sačekaj dok se završi ovo, pa kad si mogla do sad možeš sačekati još malo. Pa ne daj Bože da mu se šta desi, kako bi. Sačekaj još malo. A kakvi? Kako bi čekala. Na 2 mjeseca što sam bila gore. Da mi ga je čud. Vidite, kad sam ga vidjela ja ovako. Kratko nam je trajalo leto, kratko je slatko. bila u kući. Došao ovaj Marinko jedan. Kaže, zove te Irfan. Pitanja Marinka, je Lalen tamo? Kaže, jest. I kad smo došli pred bolnicu, prvo što sam pomislila Valenu šta bilo. Jer međutim mi smo ušli u onu.
Rođen 25.6.1970. godine u Bileći. I Mujanovića Disa, rođena 10.5.1974. godine u Sarajevu. U državi Bosne i Hercegovine. Odlučili su na današnji dan da sklope brak. Molim vas da ustanete. A Diša, da li svojom slobodnom voljom stupate u brak sa odsutnim Čustrićanom? Pošto je Jelen Čustrić izrazio želju da stupi u brak sa ovdje prisutnom Mujanović Disom, postavljam Disi pitanje da se izjasni u svom prezimenu. A Disa, možete zadržati svoje prezime djevojačko, možete svom prezimenu dodati prezime svoga supruga i možete uzeti prezime svog supruga. Možete potpisati.
Tako, pošto je to bila i njegova i moja želja, nije nam se stvarno. Tako sam eto tog dana kad su ga sahranili prije sahrane, smo se vjenčali. Nije nam se stvarno onako kako smo htjeli.
Brak proglašavan sklopljenim. I ovaj Jelen.
Sretno jesam bila to nepuna 2 mjeseca. Ali ono odjednom, eto, od te granate, odjednom se život preokrene, ono, skroz. Umjesto da budem sad tamo i ono, Alen dođe, sve normalno, ono, sjedite, pričate. Sve ovako. Rat je tako. Bila sam kod ljekara. Imat ćemo bebu. Bebu, mili. Moju i tvoju. Našu bebu.
Sarajevo is could probably best be described as a city that's very similar in scale to Seattle. It's a city that is vertical. It has lots of hills, has a river that runs through the middle that has a lot of history associated with it. The downtown area is modern in one area, or it was modern. You have an old town that blends the cultures of East and West together, much in the same way as Istanbul probably does. It has modern TV towers, and since the Olympics, had a very modern tram system and mass transportation and so forth. Today, it's all in ruins.
During this war, they've been trying mercilessly to destroy us. And my contribution to the battle against that is that turning all that's negative into positive vibrations of the spirit. When they enabled my daughters to go to school, I invented a game, and within 15 days I managed to teach them all the letters. When they destroyed the electricity, I tried to produce my animated film on window panes. When they turned off the water, I joined my neighbors and dug this well. So why are we here? Because just like Sarajevo, this is the idea. All the neighbors got together, all of us, Serbs, Croats, Muslims, people with their own tragedies, and together we dug up this well. And here, let me show you an example. Kiko, say hi to the viewers in America. Kiko and Lilia are a couple, a Muslim and a Serb. They've been apart from their children for a year and a half now. They've been digging up this well with us. And that's the way it's going to be in the future, too.
We are living always together, all nations, you know, and Muslims and Croats and Serbs and Jewish. And in Bosnia, we had 700,000 mixed marriage. I am from mixed marriage, you know, and what? We are living together, no ethnic war. No ethnic war.
In Sarajevo, you have existing structures of people every day in the most simple and small ways actually living together very, very well. And if that survives, then the whole ideology of the war and the proof and justification for genocide exists. If Sarajevo can be destroyed, completely erased, and I think in a sense that's the ultimate goal, then people will begin to forget, and the justifications for the war may be able to withstand.
That story about multi. We have all multi things in Sarajevo. We just miss maybe one thing, multivitamins. It's natural that Saka are producing the military clips. This is war propaganda for the mobilizing people to defend themselves. And you must use some stereotypes, and you must show guys who are in a good form, running and doing things, because that's what warring is. You are surviving, you are going to eventually kill somebody else. But the point is that you are doing that trying to defend your families, your children. So you are going to kill to stop the killings. That's the paradox of the war.
Sarajevo is not going to surrender. It's not going to go down in some sort of a compromise deal. It's not going to go down because the European and UN negotiators put a lot of pressure on them. It's not going to go down because the West withholds food aid to try and force a settlement. If it goes down, it's going to go down fighting, and it's go down in a fight to the last house. And the Serbs are going to probably have to pay a very high price if they want to do that. Now, they can probably cut off all the supplies, continue to shell for a much longer period of time, create the misery, the deaths, the disease that any besieged city eventually will end up with, and they can do it in the winter to make it especially miserable. But they're not going to force the people of that city to surrender. The army is made up of people who have come from ethnically cleansed areas. They've lost their families, they've lost their friends, they know what it's like to be be driven out in shame. And they are determined not to go through it again.
Sarajevo is a very weird, unusual city. Perhaps that's why it survived. Most people say of their native cities that they're weird and unusual, but Sarajevo really is. And it is not true that the clash of cultures takes place on the rivers Drina or Runa or any of these ideas that they seem to impose upon us. The clash of cultures of East and West is in Bosnia. And should Bosnia dissolve, should it be torn apart, then you will have greater confrontations between these two civilizations.
It's a peak of an iceberg that you are watching in Sarajevo. You think it's only Sarajevo. If it's only Sarajevo, I mean, it wouldn't be the problem at all, you know, but it's not Sarajevo. It's just human beings on one side and brutal, cannibalistic, I mean, fascist is a nice word for them only. You know, it's very dangerous situation. And it is just beginning of the flame. If it's not stopped, it's gonna burn, first of all, the whole territories around. Macedonia, Albania, Turkey, Greece, then Russia is so close.